Hey guys, I'm a health visitor in England. Let's discuss early rising. Now, early rising, as much as some people may not like to hear it, is anything below 6 a.m. 6 a.m. is actually an acceptable time for our children to wake up in the morning. It may not be for you, but it is a normal wake up time. It's when our melatonin, the sleep hormone, has completely worn off, and cortisol, the stress hormone, which we all have a healthy dose of in the morning to encourage us to get up and out of bed, it's being released. So it's about managing those expectations as a parent as well, that 6 a.m. isn't early rising. So there's lots of things we can do to help with early rising and rising below 6 a.m. But there's also some things that we haven't got control over. So if they're teething, if they're unwell, if they're going through development, those types of things we just don't really have particular control over. So we want to identify why they're waking. Are they waking for hunger? Are they toilet training? Is it a habit? Is there noise happening outside that's at that same time? At our house, we have a newspaper boy cycling around and his bike's really squeaky. Is there any light coming in? Not so much in the winter months, this doesn't matter, but it's really looking at that in the summer. Are they cold? Have they dropped a nap? There are so many different things that can impact that early rising. So the things we do have control over, which I urge you to change before changing anything else, is making sure that room is pitch black. Having blackout blinds, I've linked them in previous videos, but I'll link them again below. Making sure there's no natural light coming in, because that natural light is designed to wake our bodies up. If it's cold, putting socks on your toddlers, children or babies, even if they like to sleep in a lot less. Socks, for some reason, keeps that body temperature from dropping too much. And in the early morning, that is when our temperature gets the lowest. White noise, making sure that you've got something like white noise playing, and this can be nice and quiet, but it just drowns out any external noises. Like I said, is a boiler clicking on? Is there someone driving past that time in the morning? Is it the newspaper boy like at our house? There are so many different noises that you may not be hearing where your room is that we just want to rule out. And the last one is, I really recommend a grow clock. Again, I'll link it below. This is what I use for my children. This is not an ad in any way. I still use it now for my 5-year-old. A grow clock is fantastic for toddlers at setting a time that you're happy with, and then I'll talk a bit more about this in a minute, but setting a time that you're happy with, and then the sun wakes up, and then that's when they know they can come out of their room. It might sound obvious, but if you cover these areas, sometimes that is what is impacting the early rising. Let's talk about sleep pressures. Again, this is about changing our expectations of our babies, toddlers, and children. So we expect our toddlers and children and babies to go to bed at 6, 7 p.m. and then sleep for a full 12 hours until 6, 7 a.m. the next morning. Quite a lot of babies do not need that much nighttime sleep. Quite a lot of babies only need 9 to 10 hours of nighttime sleep. So if you're putting them to bed at 7 p.m. and they're then waking up 9 or 10 hours later, raring to go, ready for the day, they've probably filled that sleep tank up and they don't require much more sleep. It's a really tricky time of night to fall back to sleep. If your tank is full, you've had enough nighttime sleep, and you're just not tired enough anymore, because like I said, cortisol, that hormone that wakes us up in the morning, that's being released now, and there's not really much more reason to go back to sleep. So that's overall nighttime sleep, not overall daytime sleep in a whole. That can impact early rising as well, unfortunately. They can have too little daytime sleep, which can cause overtiredness, which impacts early rising, but they can also have too much daytime sleep, which can also cause early rising because they're undertired. So you can see how fine-tuned their sleep can be, and it can just be about tweaking it, even by 15 minutes at bedtime, putting them to bed 15 minutes later. If you're finding they're having too much daytime sleep, that last gap between waking from their nap and going to bed, that's the most important to be the longest, to really make sure that that tank is nice and empty and they're going to have a really good amount of sleep pressure. I'll give you a real rough guideline on what nighttime sleep I may be looking at for different ages. This is rough. Babies can have high and low sleep needs, and it's about learning what your baby's sleep needs are. I'll get onto that in a minute. Around 6 to 8 months, I'd be roughly seeing 9 to 11 hours of nighttime sleep. Some may be more, some may be less. And that also includes wakings. Nighttime sleep, if they're waking for an hour in the middle of the night feeding, then allow that into the total nighttime sleep. 9 to 11 months, still again, very normal to be waking in the night to be feeding. 10 to 11 hours of nighttime sleep. 12 months, around 11 hours of nighttime sleep. 18 months, around 11 and a half hours. 2 years, around 11 hours. 3 to 4 years, around 10 and a half hours. And from 5 years plus, we can be seeing maybe 10 hours of nighttime sleep. So you can see firstly how this changes a lot. Also, my 6-year-old, she is an early riser, and I do get her to bed early because she's tired, but she then wakes at 5 in the morning. We've set our own routine up. I'm happy with that. She's happy for the rest of the day. But you can see how her going to bed at 7 p.m. and waking at 5 a.m., that's her 10 hours. She's ready to go for the day. She doesn't need any more sleep than that. So let's touch on low and high sleep needs, toddlers, babies, and children. Low sleep needs, you may see that their naps are short. They wake up feeling well rested after a 30-minute nap. They can stay up for longer periods of time without being particularly fussy or overtired or unhappy. Their total nighttime sleep is shorter than others, and they wake up happy in the morning, and they have less overall sleep within a 24-hour period with nighttime sleep and naps. High sleep needs, toddlers, babies, and children, they take longer naps. You tend to see maybe 1 to 2 hour plus naps. They stay awake for shorter periods of time, or they start to become much more, irritable earlier than you'd imagine or see from other children. They can take longer to transition down between naps. If they're going down from 3 to 2, it can take longer, or you have a lot more of going between the two, and they need more sleep than those babies, other babies in 24-hour period. So a high sleep need baby, for an example, is they may wake up at 3, 4 p.m. and you see they actually go back down to sleep at 7 p.m. absolutely fine. A low sleep needs baby, they may be waking up at 1, 2 p.m. and they then need a really long gap before bedtime. Let's talk first about babies and 5 a.m. wake ups. So we still want to treat anything before 6 a.m. as a nighttime sleep, If they are waking to feed, they're 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, up to a year, months old, it's very normal to still be waking for hunger. I wouldn't worry so much about hunger habits until beyond the age of a year. If they're waking at 4, 5 a.m., feeding, going back to sleep, brilliant. I wouldn't worry personally. If they're waking at 4, 5 a.m. and they're not going back down, then that's when we really need to be making sure we're treating it as nighttime sleep. So if your baby's awake at 5 and they're chatting, I'd leave them. Leave them in their room until they start to cry. When they're crying, then we can go in and we can go in shushing, really low stimulation. If you want to offer a feed, you can, but we're going to be going in, out, in, out, in, out. And this might be where we need to be looking at how that baby is falling asleep. Can they fall asleep independently? I have other YouTube videos on this, and I've also got a £5 sleep guide, depending on your baby's age, on teaching them how to fall asleep independently. I'll make sure to link that below if you want to have a look. So just to reiterate, we're treating 4, 5, 5:30 a.m. as nighttime, and we're going to be treating it as if it was 2 in the morning, going in and giving them, shushing, going back out again, in, shushing, back out again. If you want to bring them into bed with you at this time, completely up to you. You do what's right for you, no problem for me. If that's what you want to do, but you will maybe potentially develop a habit there, but you can break habits when they're older. So do what's right for you as a family. Obviously, making sure if you bed share, you're doing it safely and you're following the Lullaby Trust guidelines on how to do so. I'll link that below. Also, dropping a nap transitions, that can cause overtiredness, which can cause early rising. So if you're seeing that you're dropping a nap and they're waking early in the morning and it's consistently happening, it may be that we need to go back to that little bit of extra sleep or just ride it out. It will pass. And when they're dropping a nap, we do want to be doing bedtimes a little bit earlier for them to catch up on that lack of sleep they're having from that nap. Nap transitions, which I'll do another video on, they're not as black and white as they're either doing 2 naps or 1 naps. We can phase them in and out. We can have a couple of days with naps, a couple of days without. We can take it as it comes and go with the flow. Nap transitions are a really tricky period for toddlers and babies. Toddlers with early rising, I do recommend the grow clock or a clock of this sort, one in which you can set the time that they're allowed to come out of their bedroom. Now what happens with these clocks is mine are set to 7 a.m. for my children. They are older now, and the sun wakes up at 7 and it means they know they can come out of their room. Now with toddlers and children, we want to be making sure that the room is obviously safe for them to be in if that's where you're expecting them to stay in and they're not in a crib anymore. I don't mind if my children, if they wake up at 5 or 6 o'clock, they're reading, they're playing with their toys. I don't mind that. That's what we've come to as a family. And like I said, they are a little bit older. But it's worth noting with the grow clock, starting at a realistic time. If your little one is waking up at 4 a.m. and not going back to sleep, set that grow clock to 4:15 and stick with that for a few nights until they learn that that's when they can come out of their room. Next night, 4:30. Next night, 4:45. You get the gist, making it so that they're aware that that's the time that they need to wake for. I get parents say to me all the time, my child was too clever, they turned the grow clock on. Guys, it's not hard, it's a button, it wakes it up. You're the parent, put it in a place they can't reach. I'm not interested in children being able to turn the grow clock on. Have it nice and high and keep reinforcing that behaviour. Back in their room, back in their room, back in their room. The sun's not awake yet, the sun's not awake yet. Over and over and over again. Give it a good couple of weeks. Move it where they can't reach it and really reinforce that they cannot come out their room until that sun wakes up. And then when the sun comes up, we really praise them. Yay, you waited until the sun came up. Out we go, let's go now. So if they are waking early, things that they can do in their room. Leave out jigsaws, leave out building blocks and safe toys that they can play with unattended. Books out, things that they're going to be occupied in their bedroom. The next thing, and this is something a lot of people don't actually often think about, is if your baby or toddler is then going down for a nap only an hour or two after early rising. So say they're waking at 5 a.m. and then you're putting them back down for a nap at 7 a.m. You're actually potentially causing this early rising. View that nap as if it's broken off from the nighttime sleep and their body is aware that, oh, I'm going back to sleep in a couple of hours, so it's absolutely fine. So what we really want to be doing there, and this is age dependent, but what we really want to be doing there is stretching that nap to later and later to encourage them to be sleeping later and later to then be reaching for that nap. And in my other sleep guide and in other videos on my TikTok and Instagram, I've got videos on nap gaps that are age dependent, really rough guideline. I'll give you an example. 6-month-old usually be seeing 2 hours after waking until their first nap. So really keeping that in mind as well. We don't want to be then putting them straight back down for a really nice early nap because that is going to potentially be causing that early rising. Something else that can cause early rising is toilet training. Hopefully, if you pardon the pun, it will pass on its own. It's another huge developmental change that does impact nighttime sleep because they're aware that their bladder's nice and full now. It's an uncomfortable feeling. We've all got it. You wake up at 5 o'clock and you're like, oh, should I roll back to sleep and ignore it, or should I get up for a wee? They don't really have that comprehension. It's uncomfortable. So depending on the toddler, with my youngest, I had a potty in her bedroom. She was very independent with it and a towel underneath it, and she would use the potty and then get back into bed. Not all children are like this. My first wasn't, and it might be a case of helping them to the toilet, taking them back to their room and reminding them, wait until the sun wakes up. And my hint is a little bit more out there. It doesn't work for all babies. It's called waking them back to sleep. If you're seeing them wake at the exact same time every single day, say at 5 a.m., it's about waking them an hour before, not fully, rousing them, maybe rubbing their back, inducing a movement that you've realized you've kind of broken them from that sleep cycle. And the theory behind this is that when they go back into that deep sleep, they are in a deeper sleep cycle where it's a different change in their waking at 5 a.m. in hope that you've woken them at 4, they'll go back into a deep sleep cycle and that habit will start to be broken. Bit of a risky one, but it does work for some babies. So just to reiterate, guys, focusing firstly on the environment, making sure that the white noise is playing, it's not too bright in there, they're not cold, there's nothing external waking them up. Looking at their overall daytime and nighttime sleep and working out what it is that you want to encourage them to do. We can't be forcing them to fall back to sleep here. We can be changing habits and encouraging them to go back to sleep, but we can't force them to go back to sleep. So as they get older, it's about adjusting our own expectations that actually if they're playing in their room and they're not bothering us, that's absolutely fine. So when it comes to bedtime and daytime naps is really understanding the cues of tiredness that your own child shows and not comparing them to other children because they are all so different. Tweaking that bedtime, maybe putting them down 15 minutes later. And also, I didn't make this point earlier, but a later bedtime doesn't always mean a later rise. That can actually encourage more early rising if they are overtired. So it's really about tweaking and starting to increase bedtime by 15 minutes a night. Give it 2 weeks. It can take 2 weeks of consistency of doing the same thing every single night to help encourage a new habit. Please like and subscribe and give me a follow if you enjoyed this content. I'm going to be uploading videos every single week. Please take a look at my Instagram and TikTok. Instagram, I go on my stories every single day, and I often do question boxes. And on my TikTok, I go live once or twice a week. I've also got some guides. The link is below. One's on toilet training, self-settling, older babies and how to stop co-sleeping and feeding to sleep, etc., fussy eating, and my early rising guide. So please do take a look. All of this is in one place. And just remember, guys, calmness is your superpower. You've got this. This will pass. Consistency, consistency, consistency.